Hi, this is Noam Pikelny, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bluegrass Jam Along interview. This week, my guest is Noam Pikelny, who's banjo player in Punch Brothers, but is also part of a fantastic new group called Mighty Poplar that pulls together some just great players and singers that you will know and love already. But this is a really exciting project, and I'm not going to chat much about it now. I'm going to let Noam tell you all about it in a sec. Don't forget, there's a weekly Bluegrass briefing episode on the podcast now, sort of news, new releases, and general fun stuff from around the world of bluegrass. Just a quick 10-15 minute listen every Monday. Don't forget to check those out. And as always, sign up for the mailing list if you want updates on when new stuff's out. There's a button on the homepage at the bottom of the website. There's also going to be a link in the show notes here. You'll find it in my bio on Instagram, stuff like that. But yeah, come and sign up and I can send you updates when there's new stuff. But that's it. Here is my chat with Noam. So my guest on the Bluegrass Jam Along this week is Noam Pikelny, who a lot of you will know from Punch Brothers. A lot of you will know from his fantastic solo albums. But he is not here to talk about those things today. And he's also not here to talk about his two IBMA Bluegrass Banjo Player of the Year awards.
I want to talk about only one of those awards.
Yeah, we're here to talk about this one specific one of those awards. What he's actually here to talk about is a new band called Mighty Poplar. Noam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Which year's award do you want to talk about particularly?
Oh, gosh, it's hard to narrow them down. I can't really remember. Maybe we could just go down all of the accolades I've gotten, maybe starting in junior high, and then we could choose after that. I don't really want to, just dwell on the awards, but maybe if we could devote the first 20 minutes to just going down the list, that would be great.
We'll turn this into 2 episodes. We'll do an awards episode and a Mighty Poplar episode and release them at the same time.
Let's do 3 just so we have some extra time so we don't have to rush it.
I mean, you're bound to win some awards, this record. It's a brilliant record. I've been listening to it for the past couple of days. And I would love to chat about how it came together, because it's a really interesting band. Would you mind, just for people who don't know, running through who is in this band for us?
For sure. So I'm playing banjo on this new project, this new band. Chris Eldridge, Critter Eldridge, who everyone probably knows from Punch Brothers, also plays with Julian Lage. He's playing guitar and doing some singing. Andrew Marlin is kind of the lead singer of this group from Watchhouse, formerly known as Mandolin Orange. Greg Garrison on bass, who Critter and I made a lot of music with about 15 years ago. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. He was the original bass player in Punch Brothers, and I knew him from before that with Through Leftover Salmon, which we both played in together back in the day. And on fiddle, we have Alex Hargraves, who is just ridiculously good. That's all I'll say.
I mean, he is. And I think that the thing that fascinated me most reading about this record is that you'd never actually played in a room together before you went and sat to record this record. You knew each other, you jammed together, but this was the first time you'd actually sat and consciously made music together. That's
true. There had been little pairings within this group where we had the opportunity to just play informally, but never had the 5 of us been in the same room together. So Critter and I have made a lot of music over the years. We played with Greg back in the day, and I think each one of us had these kind of individual experiences at festivals, backstage, jam sessions, impromptu gatherings. I had played with Andrew Marlin some backstage at Telluride, in a late night jam at Telluride. Over the years, have run into Alex Hargraves left and right, getting to play at festivals and people's picking parties. And so, there were no strangers in this group. Everyone had been connected to, everybody else, through some path. But as far as the aggregate, the 5 of us together, we had never been in the same room until we finally arrived in Nashville to make this, fairly premeditated recording, given, the timing of when it happened.
Yeah. You recorded this sort of pretty much as soon as you could after COVID, I guess.
Well, it was actually we were all in the thick of it. This record, we've been sitting on it now for over 2 years. It'll be 3 years this fall, which is crazy. But we recorded this in fall of 2020, in October of 2020. we had discussed the idea of this project for maybe a year or a year and a half prior, and then kind of everything went out the window once the pandemic hit, and for a while it didn't even seem possible or feasible for people to travel, let alone gather in a studio and sing without masks on. But this wasn't, the origins of this is it really wasn't a pandemic record. I don't think of it as a pandemic record. It was just, it happened to get recorded during that time. So there was an extra element of, I think, excitement or adrenaline to gather with everybody in October of 2020, because we had been so far from being on stage or being in studios recording albums. And I think for everyone in this band, this was really the first thing that anybody did since everything started shutting down in March of 2020. So we had been plotting to do this, and finally we figured, okay, well, let's try this. We'll take every precaution we can, and let's gather in Nashville and do this. And so I think if you remove the context of what was going on in the world from this project, it still would have been extremely exciting. And I think the adrenaline would have been there to get these 5 folks in a room to make music. But I think when you put that context back in, it was even more heightened. I think we were all really yearning to play bluegrass. This kind of I hate using terms like real deal bluegrass or real bluegrass, because that's everyone has a different definition of what that means, and that's totally fine. I don't think it is the construct of genre is somewhat obsolete at this point. But I think in our heart of hearts, bluegrass is what everybody in this band kind of grew up on and is kind of closest to our chest, even though it's not the primary focus of our full-time pursuits, whether it's Punch Brothers or Watchhouse or Leftover Salmon. I think there was this sense that each one of us individually was overdue to kind of get back into this music that we hold so dear. And as this came into focus, it was clear that this was going to be a bluegrass record. We discussed in advance kind of the validity and the righteousness of the Bluegrass Album Band records. Other bands that were kind of not full-time bands that would get together to celebrate and explore the more traditional music that influenced everything else they did, whether it's Bluegrass Album Band, Old and in the Way, bands like that I think really left their mark, despite the fact that they weren't full-time bands that were on the road touring all the time. And it was almost a way of kind of having this homecoming to the music that we hold most dear. And I think that's really what the feeling was when we got into the studio. When we sat down, we were in a remote area out in the woods outside of Nashville, and it was just the 5 of us with Sean Sullivan engineering, and it felt like coming home from the holidays, even though that, this was kind of the first time all 5 of us were in the same room together. There was this sense of familiarity and a reunion element to get to sit down and play some bluegrass. And I don't think it's worth really kind of dwelling on what the definition of bluegrass is, but I personally feel like this is part and parcel a real bluegrass project, and it was the closest thing by far. This and the record I made about 10 years ago called Noam Pikelny Plays, Kenny Baker Plays, Bill Monroe. These are by far the most kind of bluegrass-oriented projects, and I really kind of was hungry to do that again after nearly a decade away from the Kenny Baker project. But this was also patently different from that record, because the Kenny Baker project I made was entirely instrumental, and this Mighty Poplar is this record. All but 2 tracks are songs. We only have 2 instrumentals in this, and so it's largely oriented around songs and story songs. And Andrew is really kind of at the at the helm as the lead singer on this record, except for 2 songs where Critter sang lead. So it's, in some ways, it's my return to bluegrass after 10 years, but it's my first time really getting to make a bluegrass record that's song oriented. And so for me, this was, while it felt casual and that there was no pressure, nobody knew that we were doing this. It was, this cozy studio, and it was just felt easy. It was like falling off of a log. While all of that was true, this felt like a real opportunity for me, as a musician, to get to play, bluegrass with a singer like, Andrew. As far as my opportunities to play bluegrass vocal bluegrass music over the years, it's been few and far between. It's always been rewarding to throw in a, 99 years into a Punch Brother set, or, doing Roseville, Kentucky back with, John Cowan when I was in his band. It's not something that I've never done. I've done it quite a bit, but never as the central focus of a project. And so this for me felt like this is, it was something I took really seriously, and I tried to not take for granted the opportunity to record with a singer like Andrew.
And that's really interesting, that sort of song focus, because like those Bluegrass Album Band records, they almost, like for the world of bluegrass, they almost fulfill the function of like the Ella Fitzgerald Gershwin songbook and those kind of albums do in the world of jazz. They're collections of just the greatest source material performed by the best people of their time. And that I think bluegrass, sometimes the song can just be a vehicle for musicianship and instrumental playing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you hear the song put right up front and sung and delivered and, full of intent, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think that's what we strive for. I think the music that, I think we always strive for that, whether you achieve it or not. That's for other people to determine. But I think those types of performances and those recordings are the ones that, have the most staying power, because, it delivers a narrative and an emotional response from the listener. And I think, for me, the Bluegrass Album Band was the first opportunity to hear some of the first generation bluegrass music. And so like I heard the Bluegrass Album Band interpret some of the Flatt and Scruggs material or Bill Monroe material before I actually heard the source recording that they were inspired by. And I think that's a cool, progression over the years of, those guys were, Bluegrass Album Band, those guys were maybe just one generation or possibly 2 generations removed from, the original pioneers of bluegrass. And so they were that much more connected. And, fast forward to what we're working on now, or what we're doing, we're that much, we're that far removed. We're further removed from, the original kind of pioneer generation of bluegrass music. And so we've been exposed, to all these other interpretations of bluegrass. And I think that informs who we are, and, exposed to all other kinds of music as well. And so it became clear to us when we were scheming to do this record that we could do something like this in the spirit of the Bluegrass Album Band. But, in 2020, when we recorded this, the same would be true today. There have been so many, interpretations of Blue Ridge Cabin Home or Your Love Is Like a Flower that we thought it would be more, compelling, and I think more honest to who we are, if we don't try to just now throw our hat in the ring and say, okay, now we're going to do some of those exact same songs. That we could do this in the spirit of, a project like the Bluegrass Album Band, but we really should find, more quote unquote obscure material that's not, been interpreted or covered, dozens of times over the years, or, hundreds of times. And so we set out to find material that would hold up as far as the quality, but hopefully be something that, would, be a revelation to listeners of, to find material that maybe people had never heard before, or if they had heard it before, never in this kind of 5-piece bluegrass band context. So those were the marching orders. And, almost immediately Andrew was like, well, I have, 17 songs like that. Like let's do it tomorrow. I'm ready. Let's make a double album. And so that was one of the beautiful things about this, is that Andrew had been collecting and curating, songs, for so many years, things that, he could call out in a jam. And so he immediately had this list of really wonderful, songs to pitch to us. And we just kind of went down and chimed in and, talked about instrumentals that we could, kind of bookend the record with, or, to have an instrumental on side A and side B, of the record. And, talked about how we could rearrange some of these songs or reharmonize some of these songs to make them our own. And so it actually kind of came together pretty quickly once we gave ourselves marching orders. It was like, okay, here are the tunes that we can, pull from immediately. And, it was, I think Andrew got, this was an opportunity that felt so natural for him. These are songs he'd been collecting. I think he thinks of himself as a songwriter and a song collector, in addition to being a profoundly excellent mandolin player. But this was kind of this perfect moment for him, because he had been collecting this material, and here were 4 other guys eager to play it and to help arrange it and kind of make it somewhat proprietary for everybody. And so that part of it was incredibly organic and easy. And I think we took an approach in the lead up to the record of thinking about the sequence of the album, what the overarching concept was, because there was this sense of like, we have one shot to do this. We're going to, cross our fingers, and it felt like we were, about to commit a crime or something, to all travel and get in a studio together. But there wasn't this sense of like, well, let's just go record for 2 or 3 days and see what happens. And, we could always get together again, or search for more material, or re-record some of the stuff. There was this sense that this is our one shot. And so let's go into the studio knowing essentially we have a record. If we record these songs, we have a record. We know what order they could potentially be in even. And so we tried to do our homework going in. And, when we got there, it just, it felt like it had the comfort of a family reunion going home for the holidays, the excitement of this, of an impromptu jam, either backstage or on a campfire, but also this opportunity to take it to the next level. Like oftentimes in a jam, you have that raw energy and excitement, but you don't have, you're not coming up with an arrangement, anything more than it being on the fly. When you're sitting around playing in a jam, you're essentially looking at each other, making eye contact, nodding, to each other as far as when someone can take a solo. And it's usually, kind of fairly circular, that everybody gets a chance to play. And if people want to jump in and try to play a harmony, they could, try that the last minute, or play a unison part. We had this opportunity to try to capture that, lightning in a bottle, but also talk about in advance of like, okay, so we're doing this, Gray Eagle fiddle tune, that Alex brought in, that we kind of used Joe Green's, recording of this, that has JD Crowe on this record. It's a really great, I think it's a county record, from maybe the 70s. I wish I knew more details of it. It's a record I had never heard until, Alex, pitched this tune to us, which was another cool element of that. Just in the preparation of this record, we were kind of turning each other on to different music and influences. And so we had this opportunity to use that as the template for Gray Eagle. But, since we were talking about this, a month in advance of getting together, I was able to go and, learn Gray Eagle kind of with the same type of approach as how I arranged all the music on the Kenny Baker, project I did. Like try to get really inside every intricate little detail, so that when you get to the studio, we could double things together. You could play harmony. I could play a call and response type of thing. those types of things would have never happened in a jam session. If Alex just called that out, I wouldn't, unless I had happened to have studied that song and learned all those parts. And so we tried to embrace kind of both sides of that, of like, let's just capture something like this raw, but let's all get inside this material in advance. And while we're there, that we can come up with thoughtful arrangements.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, because you're sort of saying about a jam is that just sort of lightning in a bottle thing, but a jam is always meant to be a moment that is there, then it's gone. And that's the joy of it. And when you're recording it, people are going to hopefully be listening to this for years to come. The pressure can lead to taking that fun out of it. And there's a beautiful quote in some of the written material I got before this, where Chris Eldridge says, "It didn't take work other than the work and effort we've put in the rest of our lives." And that idea that you study, you work, you get your chops down, you think about all this stuff, then you just turn up and let the magic happen. And the times when that does are, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting point Critter makes there, because I don't think it's never invalid to show up for a record or a project that does require a lot of work and effort and slaving. And it's just a completely different approach. And the results of that can be incredibly rewarding, but it's a different process. And, and so the contrast between what happened on this record and some of the Punch Brothers records is pretty strong. Fairly drastic, different process. If you think of like the time and approach that went into like Punch Brothers Blind Leading the Blind, that was getting, when we arrived to start unwrapping and unraveling this piece that Chris Thiele wrote, that was essentially like showing up for a new job and having, taking, needing like years of training, like a couple years of training to learn how to do this new task, to learn how to communicate with your coworkers, and to essentially learn how to understand what this piece of art you're about to communicate to the world, to learn how it works. And while everyone in that band had the chops that got us to the point that we could get together, and commune to dive into a project like that, it was work, and we were all put, it was entirely beyond all of our abilities, with maybe the exception of Chris, when we first, got together. And so I wouldn't be the musician I am today if it wasn't for those experiences in that process of playing with Punch Brothers. And I really do think my voice as a banjo player, regardless of whether I'm playing something that's, modern, that is completely disconnected from bluegrass, that you can't even see the trail of breadcrumbs from bluegrass music, whether it's something like that that's far out that I'm doing with Punch, or something that's really kind of down the pike, like this project or the Kenny Baker project. My voice as a banjo player and my approach to playing the instrument is completely defined by my experience with Punch Brothers, and that my abilities on the instrument to interpret something like Gray Eagle on this album, and play Gray Eagle kind of the way I play it on this record, which is similar to the manner how I would arrange something on the Kenny Baker record. I wouldn't have that toolbox. I wouldn't have that approach if it wasn't for the collaboration with Punch Brothers. If it wasn't for Chris Thiele, right out of the gate saying, "Okay, so you have all these notes on the banjo. I wrote this thing. I know you technically have these notes. Figure out a way to play it, because this is what I'm hearing in my head. I need you to do this." And I'm just like, oh, all right, well, how much time do we have before we're getting together in New York? And so it's an interesting thing. Like, I think some people like to be very stubborn or strict in that music is only good if it requires suffering and kind of sweating over your project and this continual refining. I think there are people who fall into that camp, and then there are people who fall into the camp that music can't be good if it doesn't come naturally, and that if it's not this easy, carefree experience, then it's, not true to who you really are. And I find fault with both of those definitions of where good music comes from, and not definitions, but I feel like those arguments are silly, because the best music has elements of both of those things. And I think when those two things meet in the middle, that's really where some amazing things can happen. And so this project with Mighty Poplar was a nice contrast from kind of the process, other processes that have been involved with, where it was kind of a heavier lift. This felt like it felt like coming home. It felt like getting to see friends and family, and just kind of focus on the music that inspired me most early on. And it felt like an opportunity to just kind of celebrate this music, bluegrass music, which has really changed my life. I can't imagine who I'd be, or where I'd live, or who I'd be married to, or who my family is. Like this playing bluegrass, falling in love with bluegrass and the banjo was the defining moment of my life. And so to come back to this and a project like this is feels like a joy, but it also feels like a responsibility, to kind of take it seriously, come up with thoughtful arrangements, choose the material wisely, because as organic and casual as this record was, it's like I haven't done anything close to this in 10 years, and I've never really gotten to play bluegrass, like make a bluegrass songs record. And so it was this duality of it feeling so easy and casual and organic, but then on the other side of the coin of feeling like this is a big deal for me. I'm taking this really seriously. We don't want to screw it up. And it came together so quickly in the studio. It felt so natural, recording this stuff. Everything that came after the actual recording in the studio, the mixing and the mastering, all that stuff was so incredibly tedious, not because it was a challenge or we couldn't figure out how to get it sounding right, but there was this sense kind of universally within the band of like, well, we don't want to screw this up. We can't screw this up. Are we sure we like the panning? Like, we left the studio so proud of what we did, and like it felt so great. We thought like we have this responsibility not to somehow mess with this after the fact, mixing or mastering, and that combined with the fact that we were still in a pandemic, it felt like there was no immediate pressure to get this record out, because we can't go on a tour to go support it. Everyone's still at home, and so we just kind of got into this very snail's pace like approach to finishing the record. And finally we realized, okay, it's been over 2 years. We're the only people enjoying this record. Like we make this record for the five of us and our family members, or like do we want people to ever hear this? And so we finally got over ourselves and said, the mix is fine. We could have released it the day after we recorded it. Honestly, like the rough mixes we left from the studio still hold up. You could make an argument we should have just, let it out, uploaded it to, Spotify and YouTube or wherever, from the studio as we were, taking a coffee break, just in real time. And so, we finally got over ourselves, got the record done, and finally found a window to go on tour, which is happening in May and then again in September. So that's kind of what brought us to this moment. And I just kind of find it so interesting that it's something that feels so easy and so casual then became this kind of game of like making sure that we didn't screw anything up, because there was no worry like that in the studio. But we finally got over ourselves and got it done. Thank God.
And it's really interesting to sort of talking about that as a sort of the song choices you were saying about. You sort of started off by saying that it's pointless defining bluegrass in this context, and I think that's one of the things that I love about this record, and that I love about so many records. But there's this history from like bluegrass and pre-bluegrass, from A.P. Carter wandering around collecting songs to Tony Rice bringing things in from outside to Doc Watson singing whatever the hell Doc Watson wanted to sing, or somebody like Del McCoury who brings in a Richard Thompson song when it becomes bluegrass because he's doing it. And that type of song, I like that kind of song selection where it's not trying to define the project by the material, it's trying to take the material and give it a, its own thing. And there's tracks on here, there's old tracks, there's Grey Eagle for a start, but there's things like Little Joe and Blackjack Davy, but there's much more recent stuff. There's a bit of Bob Dylan on there. There's some Leonard Cohen. It's not a disparate mix of stuff, but it's quite a wide mix of stuff, and yet it all feels of the same piece.
Yeah, I think we wanted there to be a narrative to the record, and I think we chose songs that where the narratives and the stories didn't feel like they were fighting with the other material on this record. And I think that I credit Andrew for that. And because this is not the end of his list. I think he was keeping in mind when he was pitching the material, he was cognizant of what else he had already pitched and would this fit. And one of the first things he sent, even before we were going to make this record, because Andrew and I actually had a duo tour booked and on sale for in May of 2020. And so in 2019, Andrew and I were passing some material back and forth, and we were actually writing some tunes together to do on this duo tour. And he sent the Leonard Cohen Story of Isaac song, and it was just it hit me like a ton of bricks hearing him interpret that. And when we reconvened to make this record, I said, we have to do that Story of Isaac song that you pitched last year for the duo thing. That needs to be on this record. And he's Andrew's a really special artist. I think he's the type of guy that when he sings, it's not labored whatsoever. It feels very honest. And so the way he delivers songs, I think, is really inviting to the musicians who play around him, who play with him, and I think it's like, I'm pretty sure it was J.D. Crowe. I might be conflating this paraphrased quote with some other banjo player, but I remember reading in, I think, the Masters of the Five-String Banjo book that, for a bluegrass banjo player, like, it's really the highest calling is to play with a great singer. And I think there's the way Andrew delivers the lyrics, there's a real lack of kind of artifice or ornamentation. It's very plaintive and direct, which I think really serves the stories he's telling and the characters that are, within these songs telling their story. But it's also like this incredible on-ramp for the supporting musicians to help tell that story. I think if in certain situations, like the way a song is delivered by the singer, if it's maybe not as direct, I wouldn't say not as direct. I think if the directness of how Andrew delivered this, I felt like it was really inviting to me to help fill in this picture, to help paint this picture in a way. Like, he creates room. He creates room for the listener to kind of take the words in and process it, but he also creates room for the band to kind of help lift him up. It seems a little counterintuitive to think, like, the word isn't busy. Like, it's like, I can't think of singers that are busy, but there's this sense of space, when he's singing, that I think is really inviting to me as a musician, that I feel like it's not like he's just begging for me to like all of a sudden interject and for me to be like, hey, listen to me, I'm playing, banjo backup right now. I think that's, the opposite of what I'm not trying to detract from the lyric, but just like trying to help tell the story, help him tell the story. And that feels really, natural with him. And so that was something that can still, when we play together, is really rewarding playing with him. That it's very I think in the same way that a listener is drawn in to hearing, the story when he's singing, there's a similar thing going on, that he draws in the musicians, that are playing with him to really just kind of help in a cohesive way to kind of paint this picture and make it more three-dimensional. And I think that's the whole point of collaboration, is to make something more three-dimensional, to shine a new light on something, to heighten the emotional impact of a song. And that's a really rewarding thing to get to do with Andrew.
And that's one of the things I enjoyed most about the record, actually, was the singing. And it is hearing you say that.
Oh, well, that kind of hurts my feelings.
We'll talk about your awards later. It's all right. It'll all be about you again in a minute.
I can't believe you said that. Maybe you should have called Andrew. No,
I did say one of the things. But it's just that it's exactly what you were talking about. It's that thing of like some singers, it's like the difference between seeing a play in a theatre where everything's aimed at the back row and it projects and it comes over your head and it gets there, and seeing something more intimate, that he has a style of singing that makes you lean into it a bit. You lean in to listen rather than it just coming to your ears. It invites you to step towards it a bit. And that's always a joyous thing, I think. And I've always enjoyed hearing Chris Eldridge sing, but Chris is also a very unadorned singer, a very there's just a clarity and a simplicity, almost a naivety to the way he sings. And I don't mean that in any kind of bad way, but it's such an unadorned, fussy approach. So they sing beautifully together. And when Critter takes over and sings a couple, it feels totally natural as well. And for all the very, very fine award-winning banjo playing on that record, I also really enjoyed the singing.
Thank you. Critter sang beautifully on there. That song "Lovin' Babe" is one of my favorite tracks on the record, and that's kind of the only song that is considered the kind of there's a little bit of a modern co-write. That's a co-write between Uncle Dave Macon and Kristen Andreasen, a co-write that Uncle Dave Macon is unaware of, in the grave. But Kristen, who's a beautiful musician and singer-songwriter, she reinterpreted that song, and Critter brought that via Kristen. And that song was one of the more haunting moments in the studio, and I feel like it got captured. That mandolin intro on it, Andrew at the last second was like, maybe I should, we played it a couple times, and he was like, maybe I should try cross tuning for this, where he adjusted the tuning of his mandolin. And I was like, we've already done 2 takes. We're pretty close. Like, okay, so, I'm just thinking this is my internal monologue of like, okay, so we're going to, let's see how this is going to go. And he just kind of launched into this intro, and it was one of those moments in the studio that I had to make sure that I didn't ruin a take just because of how just kind of I don't know. It's not that I was shocked to hear him play something like that, but it was like he pulled a rabbit out of a hat. That he was just like, oh, maybe I should try cross tuning this, and I thought it was going to take an hour for him to sort out this thing. And I think he was just in the zone and inside this song, that just within a take or two, he was playing this incredibly haunting mandolin intro that like no producer in the world could have like coaxed that out of somebody. You can't describe in words, like, can you play, can you do that? Like, that's just something that he found, he found in his head and in his heart and played that. And the the pitfall on something like that is me just not hearing me interject how excited I was to hear it, like staying silent and playing and not forgetting that I'm holding an instrument as I'm witnessing something like that happen. Like I don't want to drop my banjo because I forget that I'm actually recording as well. That really kind of stopped me in my tracks, hearing something like that, and then taking that to the next level, like I had to respond to that. And so I think the record is filled with that kind of interplay of somebody doing something that was maybe not expected, because we couldn't have real expectations of what was going to happen, because this is such a brand new ensemble. And so it can go either way. A band that goes on the road for a month playing new material and just kind of tests it in front of an audience, that can do wonders for getting ready to record. And you go and record, and you have this experience, confidence, you've refined something on the road, but that can also remove some of that sense of exploration or experimentation from the process. And I think this record would have been patently different if we had booked a tour to test this material out, and then went into the studio afterwards. Because as profound as that mandolin intro is on Love and Babe, or Alex's fiddling is on Gray Eagle, and everything on the record, if I had that experience of hearing that every night, it wouldn't have lessened how great it was, but it would have lessened some of that immediate kind of inspiration and surprise and responsibility to respond in the moment. And so I think the fact that a lot of that stuff happened just right then and there, and never heard it before, like some of that stuff, it might even be the original take where Andrew cross-tuned, and that, so he did that, and we hadn't heard anything like that, and then had to continue playing, and it shapes the entire rest of the moment of that recording, and in a way that just, it couldn't have happened that way if a part like that had gotten kind of codified as, that's the intro and I've heard it 20 times now. That's the I think one of the it's one of the downsides of being on stage is you have that experience of hearing the music live, for the first time once, when you get to hear the band playing that. And when you go on tour, the audience is having that experience every night, which is why that, there's no substitute for live performance in the room with the community of people who are there for the same reason, this communion, with, via music. And I think that's, that type of kind of epiphany that an audience gets every night, because it's their first time hearing that in a room. We have to suspend or extend. We have to sustain that same type of excitement and revelation when we're on stage playing. We can't, that is a tricky thing, playing with great musicians who perform at that level every night, to not take for granted their artistry or their brilliance just because you may have heard that happen 70 other times this year in 70 other towns. And so that's something that's interesting about making a record this way, is that we had kind of that same experience and excitement as a listener at a concert, who had never heard the material interpreted before. We had that with each other in front of the microphones for the first time.
And how does that sort of translate forward? Obviously, you are doing some gigs for this. Does this feel like a Bluegrass Album Band kind of project that will roll on to another record and sort of more? Or have you not thought that far ahead yet?
No, we have. I think that's the plan. I think we chose this material and we assembled this group of guys because it seemed like this would be something that wouldn't just be a one-off kind of flash in the pan project that we like I think there's not like the world needs us. Like, the world doesn't need us, but we need this. We need, this kind of, project to put our energy into that we can, revisit every 2 or 3 years. I think it's something that's, it keeps us grounded as musicians. And I think it, will make us better musicians and better contributors to the other projects that we're in. To have something like this that is our, kind of focused around bluegrass music, I think it clarifies our identity as musicians. I think it's a reminder of kind of where we came from and what our marching orders are going forward, whether within this project or with other projects. And I think it definitely kind of scratches the itch that we all have to focus and play this music, which can be liberating in other contexts. Like, you don't need to find that necessarily elsewhere. And if you have it here. And so I say that as for us as players, not for listeners. I'm just saying, but maybe I should be suggesting to other people, now, you don't need another bluegrass record now. As long as we do this every 2 or 3 years, you'll have a bluegrass record that should tide you over. You don't need to listen to anybody else, just Mighty Poplar.
I mean, if it's going to take you 3 years to release each record, we might need something in between.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, perhaps some other people will release some music as well. It's real quiet out there. You go online and to see, what's being released, and it's just a tumbleweed, the equivalent of a tumbleweed. There's not much going on right now. Not many albums being released. Nothing. No place to consume music. No place to watch videos. It's just, such a simple life out there.
Just not enough content in the world.
Whatsoever. Yeah. There's such a lack of content. That's my problem with the internet. Is there's just such a lack of content.
You know what you want, but you just can't find it.
Yeah.
And has it been hard to kind of keep? Because obviously, since you recorded this, Alex has started playing with Billy Strings, who is potentially the busiest human being on the face of the planet. Yeah. And that must have thrown a bit of a spanner in the works.
Well, it's so awesome that Alex is playing with Billy, and I went and saw them play here at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville about a month ago, where they played 2 nights at this 20,000 seat arena, and it was just incredible. They killed it. They sounded amazing, and Alex sounded incredible. Everybody was just playing so well, singing so well, and so I think I'm a big fan. I think they're doing amazing stuff, and it's just undeniable. Like, there's no surprise to me that it's taking off and that millions of people are into it, because it's really compelling. When I think we made this record knowing that we hoped for this to be a recurring thing, and that we would find a chance to tour eventually, but there was no strict guidelines of how that was going to happen, clearly, because it took us almost 2 years to finish the record, get it mixed and mastered, and to take a photo. Over 2 years to do those things. And our photo shoot is literally was thrown together backstage at the Green Mountain Bluegrass and Roots Festival. That was the only time that all 5 of us had been in the same place since we recorded the record, nearly 2 years after the fact. And we said, "Hey, let's go sit on this, on these stairs here and take a photo." And so that's how that all transpired. But there was no big time strategy or calendar plotting that was like, okay, so this is when we're going to do this. This is when the record's coming out. We're going to do a tour here. And then we get this call from Alex, like, guys, I'm having to back out from, there was nothing to back out, from on Mighty Poplar, because it was wide open how we were going to revisit this, how we were going to tour on this. And so it wasn't this, letdown. I mean, I love Alex's playing, and he's there's, he has first right of refusal for any time we go on the road. And he's working around Billy's schedule. He's going to do some festivals with us, this year. But we have the amazing John Mylander is going to be doing some of the touring in May and possibly in September, with us. And so, it didn't feel like this, blow. It was only, celebration when I heard that news. I was just so psyched for Alex to have that, because this was always seen as a, part-time kind of reunion recurring project, and we'll make it work around everybody's schedules. And obviously it threw a little bit of a wrench into the works, but there was no works at that point. Like when Alex, told us this was, maybe a year and a half ago when he gave us the news of this, we were still, mixing this record that could have been released the day after it came out. And so it didn't feel like our plans were being sabotaged or anything like that. It just felt like, oh, that's awesome. Go do that. And, eventually this record will come out. And if you can't make a show or, or can't do a tour, it's not the end of the world. We'll make it work. So I think, I've heard stories of bands, where people are really proprietary about their members, going and doing solo projects or being part of other collaborations. And that is just like a recipe for disaster. And, Chris Thiele, in the early days of Punch Brothers made it very clear that like he wasn't proprietary about, what people did outside of the band, but made it very clear that like the band was not going to be his only project, and that he had all these other ideas and collaborations that he was going to pursue, and that he set expectations very realistically of what people can and should be doing, and the amount of time they should be allotting for different things. And I think that was really healthy, because I think it could just become suffocating to be stuck in a collaboration and feel like for whatever reasons like you can't do anything else. Like that you need to have those same 5 people there, or the same 3 people there, for every show, and that you don't feel like you're empowered to go do something else. I think Punch Brothers, and I'm using it as reference just because it's the most long-standing collaboration I've been part of. That band got better, progressively through the years. We've gotten, I think we've become a better band, and we've become better musicians, and our music has become more three-dimensional, not just due to the cumulative effect of being around each other, but because of everybody going their separate ways when the band hasn't been active, to work on their own music and to find their voices and to hone their skills, either as an instrumentalist or as a composer, or as a producer or even engineer. Like the Punch Brothers is a better band now than it was, rewind however many years, because of, what Paul has been doing in Hawktail, because of what Gabe has, done in the studio with a million other projects. It's just not better because of what I've done. I can't really think of anything. I can roast a chicken. Maybe band is better because of that. No, you know what I'm saying? It's,
yeah.
I think there's this rising tide from people feeling empowered, and to be able to go do other things. And also just, it removes this, like, if people can pursue whatever music in different collaborations, then when you come back to Punch Brothers, nobody has an agenda of being like, I really want to play, a bluegrass tune. Like, can we put a bluegrass, can we put a fiddle tune on this record? Nobody has an agenda, because you could search for those outlets in other contexts. And so when everybody comes back, it's just like, well, let's just find, where do we meet on this project? And it can be, I think it could be liberating in that sense.
Yeah. And everything about this record that I've heard so far, and everything, the way I've heard each of you talk about it, and the way it just sounds as a listen, it sounds like some people coming together. And you brought back at the beginning of all this, you said you don't think of it as a pandemic record. And so many of those pandemic records were ways people found to make music in weird circumstances. And this feels totally like a coming together of people, which was the thing we couldn't do then. And it feels like a bunch of energy brought together in a room that just sits and increases exponentially.
Yeah, I don't think the record would be much different if you remove the pandemic from the context of it. But I do think it was heightened. There was a heightened excitement to get to play music with each other, because there had been this drought for 7 months or so prior. But I think the real drought that kind of makes this record what it was is not the pandemic related shutdown, isolation. It's the fact that this music is something that we hold so dear, and it's just been many years for each one of us since we've gotten to play music, bluegrass like this, and in some instances the very first kind of first record that we've been able to focus around this, and so that to me is still something I sit and think about. It's like, oh, this is like this. Going back to my roots, this has been the thing I've most connected to throughout my life and career. But it's still the first time I've ever made a record like this. Like, what took me so long? And so it's a joy for me, kind of from any angle I look at it.
And it's a joy to listen to. And it's been a joy chatting to you about it. I've really enjoyed this. I have only one question left, and that is why Mighty Poplar?
Oh, yeah. So we went back and forth on what to call this project for nearly 2 years. I think that was another reason why we didn't feel any pressure to actually finish it, because we couldn't decide on a name. All we knew was that this needed to be we needed to have a name, that this was not going to be the, Marlin, Pikelny, Eldridge, Garrison, Hargraves, like a law firm. We wanted there to be no question that this was kind of a legitimate project that was going to be happening again. And I think if we couldn't think of a name, nobody would think that we took this seriously enough that, it was a real thing. There was maybe just a thrown together pandemic record. They just got together because what else was there to do? It wasn't that. And so we wanted a name, and Bluegrass Album Band was taken. I suggested we call it the Bluegrass Ringtone Band. And that didn't, nobody liked that. We had a bunch of different names, and then kind of at the 11th hour, Andrew pitched Mighty Poplar. And he latched onto it because Bill Monroe, on a live recording with Doc Watson, was introducing a song, and he said the song is Mighty Poplar, or this song was Mighty Poplar. And Andrew texted, I can't remember what song it was. I'm embarrassed to say, but I'll look it up, and we can re-record this entire podcast. So Andrew said, how about Mighty Poplar? And and we all just kind of felt like, that's the name. And if you don't like it, don't blame us, blame Bill Monroe, and see how you'll sleep at night if you're going to sleep holding a grudge against Bill Monroe. Good luck. This podcast sponsored by Ambien.
Oh, brilliant. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.